Welcome to Ben Navarez podcast with your host, Ben Navarez.
Howdy. Hi.
What's going on?
And welcome back to the podcast. We normally don't do an entry point early, to be honest with you. But because we were already talking, I wanted to just go ahead and start like that. So thanks for coming in, Dan.
Thanks for having me, man.
Dude, I am excited to learn more about the book, about the healthcare industry here in Las Vegas and why it's so terrible, and areas of improvement and everything else you got going on in the world, man.
What an intro. Terrible medicine in Las Vegas.
I've just heard such bad things consistently. So, and I don't understand really why, or like why this area in particular, the Valley, is known to be not the best in the healthcare industry.
Man, I wish I had the answer to that question. I guess I'm a little, maybe not biased, but a different viewpoint coming from North New Jersey. So it's a very different culture compared to what Las Vegas is used to. And I don't know, man. I just think it's the type of vibes. Northeast is fast, aggressive, and I think people are always moving, sometimes too fast, but they're always looking to get to the next thing. And I think that translates into the medicine, which is, I don't have time to be sick, so let's get me healthy. And Vegas is definitely a little more West Coast, a little more laid back. And I think that's part of it, is just the mentality has always been just, we have time, we're good. And it kind of lulls you into a false sense of security, and there's not a lot of urgency because of that. And it's interesting because I look at healthcare as an opportunity to provide strong, not just patient care, but customer service. And being that Vegas is obviously very customer service oriented, I would tend to think that would trickle down to medicine, but the mentality is just very different. So the expectations that people have also go a long way. And just, again, coming from the Northeast, expectation is we're going to do absolutely everything. We're going to do it really fast, and we're going to get answers. And so I think a lot of it is just the people, and to change anything, whether, especially as it relates to just the culture of a city and the culture of a whole field like healthcare, has to come from the people that are actually sick. And what I mean by that is you got to demand better. And over time, yes, you have to get practitioners that come in who understand that mentality and who don't just accept the way it's always been. Say we just have always taken our time and we just go very methodically and slow. And that's not the way it is. And, being newer to Vegas over the last 2.5 years, it's interesting to talk to people who live here, who have the viewpoint of it is terrible. It's always been terrible. And if I need anything really, something really worked up, I have to go to Los Angeles, or I have to just go to California, which is just crazy to think that and to actually hear that from people who are here. But yeah, I just think it's expectation to people who are actually here and are living. And ideally, as much as we're getting a lot of people from California moving in, I tend to think maybe the perspective will change, and you bring some of that Los Angeles kind of mentality towards healthcare to Vegas. That should change over time, ideally.
Is this going to be congruent or synonymous with all different types of healthcare? So like a hospital versus internal med versus PT versus chiros, are those issues, if you will, like the lack of customer service or care, which, for good point, like this is a town that thrives off of customer service. Yes. So like, that's wild to me. But even at these smaller shops that are physical therapy or all these other different types of medicine, is that still the same thing, or is it happening less in these smaller areas and maybe more at like the hospital or whatever it may be?
I think it's more global. It's just you still see a lot of clinics that have maybe weeks of a waiting list, just to get seen. Sometimes it's not their fault. They just maybe don't have enough providers to treat patients. But then other clinics and other healthcare systems, there's just, I get it, man. It's tough, right? Some of them are short-handed, and it's just you can only service so many people and provide good care. But I think a lot of it is just the mentality has to drastically change, and never thought I would look to casinos for how to improve medicine, but you got to go above and beyond for people. And I think just overall within the healthcare space outside of just Las Vegas and Henderson is the mentality that there is a place to over deliver on care. And some people have gotten away from that, and it's just sometimes it's a numbers game that you just got to get through people. But the best way I look at it is it's going to McDonald's versus going to that expensive burger place. It's going to be a very different experience. And if you're at McDonald's, you just turn it through it. And that's the way a lot of these clinics are. It's just volume, and they got to get through it. They got to survive, and I totally understand that. But there's still a better way to do it, just in terms of creating simple systems and operations that could actually help people, with their issues of having too many patients that they haven't done it.
I guess I don't know what a system would look like inside of a clinic that will allow it to function more efficiently. What is something that somebody could do to allow their practice to function better?
Yeah, I mean, how many people still go to a doctor and they have to fill out paperwork? Right? It's like little stuff like that. It's just, why am I filling out paperwork in the office? It's almost 2025. As opposed to sending me the paperwork even through an email to expedite the process. Having patient portals, just using technology to your advantage. And that's one of the things that still blows me away. Appointment reminders, and then outside of creating systems, it's just, what are you doing to actually improve the experience for the person? If you ask most people, what's the worst part of going to the doctor? It's usually not the doctor. It's the front desk. I love my doctor, but I hate the front desk because they're miserable. Right? And I've heard that so many times, though. And it's just, that's a mirror into the, to the clinic and to the culture. So it's being able to create systems in terms of just how to protect your brand by knowing how to interact with people. And little things like follow-ups, calling a patient the next day after the appointment to see if they have questions. I've probably count on one hand how many doctors I've seen actually do that. And that's for people that even had surgery. Usually it's maybe a nurse, but how impactful would it be if your doctor called you? I know one doctor that does that, and the patient's always blown away. It's like, the doctor actually called me. That's why they keep going back. So it's really, it's little stuff. But again, even just using technology, appointment reminders, and giving people the opportunity to just make their life easier. I think that's the way all of us want, is just to make things simple instead of complex.
In the preventative space, so I'm in preventative healthcare, it is almost a mandatory for, like, every single time I meet with a client for the first time, I'm sending a text the following morning, giving a call, something, just to like, hey, how are we feeling? Like, we worked out for the first time in X amount of months or years sometimes. How is your body handling this? And almost always it is a, hey, thank you so much for checking in. It's that simple of a thing to do. And I'm not a doctor's office. I don't necessarily have to call my patients. And usually my patients are working in the middle of the day. So maybe I could still implement a call rather than a text. That'd probably be a little bit more personable. But I tend to lean toward the text. But it's just, hey, how are you doing? It's so simple.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot.
Earth shattering, I know, right? Like, actually following up with somebody to see how they're feeling. I mean, I had an experience like maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I got in a car accident. I was okay. The car was like screwed up, but I'd been seeing a doctor at that point for an issue. I got my car back. I got a call from the mechanic. Never got a call from the doctor. I was like, how is it that this person's following up with me about my car, and then the doctor's not even following up with me about my body? I was like, that just blew me away.
That is bonkers.
I know. I even said to the lady at the mechanic, like, I appreciate this so much. And I told her the whole story. I was like, you called me and the doctor didn't. Good credit for you.
That is so wild.
So it's like, we're willing to reach out to people about their cars, but not about their body or their brain or whatever they're seeking care for. And I like that always just blows my mind.
It's like the most important thing that we own is this meat bag, sack. And people aren't following up with the most important thing to who they are.
I know. It's just, I don't get it. And then you hear stuff like, I don't have the time, the manpower, this and that. I'm like, there's so many resources nowadays. That's why I'm like, you have to adapt. I mean, You don't want to train a chatbot? Okay, you could hire a VA. There's so many resources, and if you're not doing it, you're just making excuses.
For those that don't know, what is a VA?
Virtual assistant. I mean, you can hire somebody in the U.S., you can hire somebody overseas if you want to save some bucks, and just have somebody do all your calls for you if you want to do that. Or if you don't want to get an AI assist and you want a real human, there are options. But that's my point is there's resources, and we're not even using it. And then we say, I don't know what to do.
How did you find all this stuff out?
You have to want to be focused on progress, right? So if you're focused on how do I make things better, you're always looking for that next thing to add. And whether it's that's just the way I've become over time. But if you're looking to improve a business, and that's really what healthcare is at the end of the day, it's still a business. If you're not making money, if you're a for-profit company, then you're not staying open. So this mentality of, well, we're in healthcare, we can't make money, then okay, that's fine. Just have less employees. Don't give them any raises. Don't give them any bonuses, like none of that. So it's like you need to make money, and money comes from making things better. In terms of getting people to come back, refer friends and family. The better you can make it for them, the more business you're going to have. So being able to understand how do I constantly make progress all the time, even for things that work really well, can I make it better? So you're always looking for the next, and that's how I find, realistically, these, whether it's a AI assist or a person, it's just how do we make things easier? How do we make things more efficient? It's really, for me in business, I'm always looking not to cut costs through firing people, but just where are we wasting money and where are we wasting time that I could take somebody who's got skills to do something else instead of maybe having them not do 100 calls a day. I could have somebody else do that and use their expertise somewhere else.
It's not fucking rocket science.
No, it's not, but we make it. Yeah, we make it rocket science.
It's like if anybody walks into a store, like we all go grocery shopping. If I see my grocery shop clean, that's probably going to make me feel comfortable buying more produce. It's going to make me stay longer. Versus if I walk into a dirty restaurant or a dirty grocery store, then yeah, I don't want to really, I'm probably not going to trust everything 100%. And we all experience service every single day. And so I don't, as a business owner, where does that disconnect happen? You experience it. Business owner goes to a nice restaurant. They're really like the customer service is great, right? In Vegas, not a lot of, but I would say a lot of our hosts, wait staff are career wait staff. And they have the luxury of that because you have people who value service so highly that they tip well. And so a business owner goes into a restaurant. This individual is like, can I get you water? Do you want ice or no ice? Sparkling, not sparkling? Like all these options are all present. And then behind the scenes, the company's made it possible for that individual to easily select in an efficient flow behind, so that this person's walking out, this person's getting drinks. And so it's all designed on the back end. It makes it a lot more efficient for you to actually get your beverage and then get it in a clean cup and the whole thing. And you enjoy that. So what's the disconnect?
So if you think about it, right, the best businesses, no matter what, they all have the same thing very much in common, which is they like to serve people. So if it's a restaurant, I love getting them a good product, providing a great experience for them. Selling shoes, same thing, right? So it really comes down to what's the mentality of the person who owns the business. So are you doing it to serve others, or are you doing it to serve yourself, right? So it really comes down to, I like saying that I run a business because it just makes me feel good about myself. But then you're not creating everything you just described. Those are systems, right? It's like you're going this way, you're going that way. You know to ask, how many types of water do you want? Do you want lemon? It's like, all right, I didn't think there was that many availability for water, so many options, but you teach them all that. That's a system. And you do that because you know that's what's going to create a very consistent high-level product or high-level service. Versus, if you're running a restaurant, you wouldn't expect to go there twice and have two different drastically different experiences. So it really comes down to what's the mentality of the person who owns or runs the business, and who they're actually serving. And then honestly, it just comes down to, do you have the capabilities to recognize what you don't know? Because a lot of people want to open a business and then they just launch right into it. And it's the proverbial, you don't know what you don't know. So are you willing to swallow your pride a bit, maybe check your ego? And we all have ego, but you're willing to check it a little bit to evaluate, all right, what am I missing? And how could I make this better? And what areas need to be strengthened up? And the areas that are maybe great, can we make them outstanding? Versus the person who's just, everything's great. And that's just them making themselves feel better about who they really are. You know, that's why I look at even something like healthcare, where we have a lot of doctors who are running medical practices. And I love you doctors, but you're the worst. Because there's a very different type of brain that a doctor has. It's a very analytical kind of personality. And it usually doesn't make good for business. But there's that ego of like, I'm a great doctor, so I got to be a great business person. Being great at one thing doesn't mean you're not going to be terrible at something else. It doesn't translate to everything. You know, I'm pretty athletic, but that doesn't mean I know how to put together a software program, because I'm terrible at computers. You know, like, it just doesn't make sense.
I can learn anything. I can do it. No,
yeah,
it's fine.
like, that's exactly it. So I think that's really part of what it comes down to. It's just that pride aspect that we all have as human beings, and really knowing who you're actually serving. And if you're really out for yourself, then you're never going to put those systems together. You're never going to really work on developing it or building it.
I think that your analogy is a good one, because I found myself in that position when I started doing the podcast, where I was like, all right, well, I have to learn all the product knowledge of what goes into this thing. And at the time, I was getting my master's in exercise phys, and I felt so disgustingly overwhelmed with how much actually goes into it. And I was like, this is actually a lot. And I realized, like, yes, I've had success in being an athlete. And so my thought was, I believe that I can learn anything, but that doesn't mean that I have to or that I should. If anything, at that time, at the very beginning of the business, unfortunately, the reality is that I have to. Yeah. I don't have another option. But as time goes on, it's like, well, I can hire an audio engineer who can do this a hell of a lot better than me. Could I finagle it and maybe get good in 5 to 10 years? Probably. Yeah. But I have somebody who's been doing it for 15 years. That's right in front of me. Why am I going to spend so much time learning something when I can be learning how to do something else, or actually working on the business part of it? You know, could I do it? Yes. Is it a waste of time? Also, yes.
Yeah, 100%. And that really comes down to, what are your goals, with the business, which I find that just some people don't have any. Like, they don't have anything very specific. It's just, well, I want to make enough money to retire when I'm 45, or, okay, well, how much do you need? You start setting us very specific goals, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm not going to be able to get there if I'm trying to do everything myself. Because to your point, you're like, you will get there, but do you want to get there in 10 years? Or would you rather get there in 5 with the support of somebody else?
There's a quote. You'll go faster alone but further together, and I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think you go faster together and you go further together. I don't like you can do things alone, and maybe I don't know that you could do it faster. Maybe I'm trying to think about in a scenario that would work. I'm sure that it exists, but
I think it comes down to that if you're by yourself, you don't obviously have to have other discussions with other people, right? Like when you're deciding on things, there's no, well, let's explore my side of it. There is no other side of it because it's just you, right? So it does create the capability to potentially move faster just from decision making, and just go on whatever path you want to make. Okay, I screwed up. Let me go back. Let me try something different. Whereas if you're working with other people, now obviously you're responsible for potentially their livelihood. So now you're maybe a little bit more judicious with what kind of decisions you make. But to your point, it's all right. How many times will you fail by yourself? Versus the best people all have a team. So I think from what you just described, it's also a matter of, do you have the right team? The wrong team will slow you down for sure. So you got to pick your people wisely. And that's where I feel some people make that mistake, is just, well, I brought, like I hired my cousin. I don't understand what went wrong. I had help. Like, what does your cousin know about business? Well, I mean, they don't know anything. So like, what'd you bring them on for? to do my auntie a favor. That's where a lot of people make the mistakes. They go for the wrong people, just like maybe they get the wrong partnerships. And it's unfortunate you probably will make some mistakes. But you got to learn from them and bringing on the right people and knowing what kind of talent you're looking for, what kind of personalities do you work with. Sometimes we're not really. It's very interesting. Like, we have a criteria for who our friends want to be, but then not so much sometimes for people we want to work with. And you're going to be with them more than anybody, especially if you're just starting out, and this is going to be a key person for you who you can't maybe readily fire. Like, you're not going to fire your partner. Just, hey, Ben, by the way, like, today's your last day, buddy. It's like, well, I own half the company. What are you talking about? It's not the way this works. So we don't tend to think about that. We just jump right into it. And then people get turned off and they're like, oh, I'm never doing that again. Let me just do everything myself. And you see that even just in, fields, even like healthcare, where it's like, well, we have 50 employees. I'm not doing this by myself. Yeah, but you don't have anybody else kind of as your number two. So everything is still coming down to what you say. And they can still move a lot faster. And that's what some people equate speed with efficiency. Sometimes speed leads to just a lot of mistakes.
You make those mistakes really quickly, I guess.
Yes.
But then if you don't have any input on like how you could have avoided that mistake, or like another outlook into the problem that would have been just like, maybe you make a solution, but having another person's perspective and somebody to bounce an idea off, and you'd be like, oh shit, like if we put these two things together, like if we implement this walkway and then we also implement this desk situation, then the user has a better experience walking into the door. Okay, cool. Like let's put that into practice. Yeah. It makes it so much better. So much better.
It does, but then you have the people who they stay. Again, if you're a solopreneur, obviously a whole different ballgame. I mean, hence the whole name. But if you're in a company and you want to make all the decisions yourself, that just tells you have a lot of insecurities. If you don't do well with somebody else giving you some feedback or telling you that things could be improved. Because then in that scenario, you're going to make the mistakes, but then you're going to always find a reason to blame somebody else or blame a situation. It's the economy, it's inflation, it's a pandemic, it's a war. It's always something else, and it's never about you. Versus the person who brings on a support or even just regular employees that they can say, hey, give me some feedback. What could we do better? Or what could we do differently? That person is going to operate drastically different, and the business is going to work very different as well.
Where forgiving power, there's an exchange of power that I think is necessary in order to be a good leader. And I think that I always demonized power. Just if absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so I was always moderately afraid of attaining any sort of power. And then I realized that, oh, well, I guess I am technically in a position of power, like with a client. Like I'm telling somebody what to do. But I can also be in that moment and say, this person no longer wants to do this specific movement. They don't feel comfortable. They don't feel confident. Okay, cool. Like I have to use my expertise to say, well, I can accomplish the same goal. We're just using a slightly different movement that might make this person feel more comfortable. So I think forgiving power is a rather fun thing to do. Have you had that dynamic, and then have you seen that dynamic play out in your own personal growth and then inside career growth?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a position of leadership, and I think that's I like the leadership terminology because a lot of people don't view the position they're in as one of leadership. And what I mean by that is, if you're a parent, you're a leader. Like, you're actually helping somebody else grow and develop. But as human beings, you have the ability to always step up into that position or into that role with whatever you're doing in life. But ultimately, as it relates to even just myself, I'm kind of like along with you, where I still look at it like, it's not good, to have like obviously encompassing power. And then I started realizing that I was a very dominant personality. So it's like very, very interesting for me. I'm like, I don't think it's a good idea, but then I'm like, I'm doing it myself. It's like, yeah, who knew I was like micromanaging people and that I just have a very controlling personality. Cool. But it really comes down to, how does that affect others? Because there's always good that comes with some of those behaviors. So even having a dominant, controlling personality, I always looked at it as like, it got me real far in my career because I worked a lot. I worked super hard, which is a characteristic that I had, and I just took a lot of ownership. So it got me real far, and it deceives you into thinking that this is the best way to do it. Versus, I wonder if there's a different way that would help me get even further. And that's what most of us don't really analyze. You just look at past results and you're like, pretty damn good. Why would I change? Versus when you start looking outwards, if your goal is to really maybe your goal is not even to grow other people. Maybe it just really is to grow yourself. You will hit a plateau at some point. And that's how you realize, or you should realize, that something needs to change. And when you're really focused on yourself, like I used to, we're all younger, we're all looking for our own praise and significance to be able to say, I did something with my life. You have that mentality, you will get very far, but then you will hit a sticking point. And at some point, it's just knowing, if you want to call it power, or you just want to call it control. And like that scenario you described with your client, some people would say, nope, we're doing it this way. Right? Like this is my program, this is what we're doing. Versus, all right, let me be a little flexible, let me adapt a little bit, let me give this person a bit of a voice. And what kind of win will that get me? A lot bigger than the person's like, no, this is the way we do it, and this is the only way we do it. So it's being able to give some people some of what you have per se, but it's just recognizing it's not called for at all points. I guess the proverbial win the war and not worry about every single battle.
At what point was your plateau, right? Because you had a lot of success. I don't think we talked about that yet. So if you don't mind, what has been your experience working in healthcare so far? And then we'll get to the point of plateauing.
Yeah.
And when you realize that.
So for me, it was great. And it was been in a model that was always very patient focused. And the benefit for me was having my mentor, who was also our CEO, was not in healthcare at all. His background was Wall Street. Very different mentality. And I know you hear Wall Street, you tend to think, all right, so it was all about money, but he actually brought the customer service angle. Because he liked going to some high-end places, he liked going to the Four Seasons, and he's like, that's what we're bringing here. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. He's like, it's all about the customer service, which I didn't get at the beginning. And then I started to actually practice, like, dude, this makes so much sense. This is the best way to do it. So for me, the experience has always been good. Personally, I would say my growth was way bigger than I ever imagined it. Not even just financially, but just in terms of what I was able to accomplish, what I was able to do with patients. But as it relates to plateau, whether it's just career progression, salary-wise, for me, it was just more so about career progression, where I was, there was no more room. Like that was it. I kind of maxed out on my growth. And, again, like I think for most people, they're going to be pretty good with that, especially when you're in a position where it's maybe you're like the third highest ranking person in the company. Like it's a good spot to be in.
Yeah.
Had total freedom to basically do whatever the hell I wanted, within reason, obviously. But, for me, it's always going to be within reason and ethical. And I think for most people would say I'm in a great spot, doing well financially, and there's not a lot of pressure on me, and I'm operating at a high level. But if you're looking to take the next step, that's when you just realize you have to do something different. And that's what I hit, and that's what I think a lot of people do hit their plateau, which is why a lot of people hate their jobs, because it's just they realize there's nowhere else to move up. I've kind of reached the pinnacle of my career, and especially if you're younger, like 20s or 30s, and you're like, this is it. Like the next 30 years, I'm going to basically be doing the same thing. And that's how I kind of looked at it. It's just, I don't want to be doing the same thing for even 5 years, but forget about like 10 or 15 years. So you got to realize what is causing, what really causes the plateau. And even if the plateau is just within growth of employees, you got to eventually look at yourself and start thinking, if not acting on, at least thinking that maybe you're contributing to it.
Are you I guess you're partnered with one of our last guests, one of our former guests, Antonio. You guys can go listen to his episode. And it was a wonderful episode. He's a wildly intelligent human being. He is beautifully intelligent. I hate him a little bit for it sometimes, but his perspective is just, it's so out of the box. It's wildness. It's so fucking cool to like watch him think. But either way, you're partnered with him. Are you at this point an entrepreneur? Was that the plateau? Like, okay, now I need to get out and go and do my own thing?
What it really was, really just came down to how can I help more people? And where I was helped a lot of people, but it's really, how could you multiply that? And I know being in that scenario, it wasn't going to do it. And that's just because, at least for me at that point, I was very vested in working for the one company I was with, like really vested in their growth, employees' growth, patient growth. And it just, for me, there's no way I was doing that and then building out something on the side. Which is why I basically made the move from New Jersey to Las Vegas. Was just, I got to change it up, do something completely different, and put myself in an environment where I can figure myself out how I was going to do that. You know, working with a guy like Antonio is really good because he's very similar to my mentor, not in healthcare. So it's a different perspective on how to approach things, which is really helpful because it's just an unbiased opinion. But yeah, man, I think for me, it's just I think for most people, it's just you have to at least realize what is my trajectory and like what am I really looking for long term. So if it's going to be as an entrepreneur or not, I think that's up to the person to decide. And you know, you had mentioned something before we came on. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. So a lot of people jump into it, and I get it. It's sexy to say you own your own business or you're an entrepreneur. You see things on social media. So it's very alluring, especially when you look at the financial ability that it provides. But then people get in, it's just like, all right, I'll work 20 hours a week, and I'm going to make a shit ton of money, and this would be great. And then reality sets in, and like, oh shit, this is hard. You know, and it's not easy. And you see a lot of times the end product of where people are, it's like, hey, now I'm making 7 figures a year selling, you know, e-products. And it's like, I could do that. But you didn't see all the time and energy they put into building that out. And the hundreds, if not probably thousands of hours they spent learning, developing, making mistakes, not letting it ruin their confidence, come back for more. That's not for everybody. So it's really just a matter of knowing how to deal with those situations, but also being realistic and just expecting to work hard and expecting things to take time.
That confidence piece is a big piece that I don't know. I mean, I don't ever really see it talked about, but it's very real. For you to get knocked down over and over, or like just I've worked one job, I know how to do one thing, and then all of a sudden you step out in this space and you realize, oh, I have to learn all of this stuff that I'm not good at. I have to really crawl before I can walk. I gotta like army crawl. I'm not even on my knees, hands and knees. I'm just like on my elbows, like dragging myself through. And then I finally learned enough to know that, wow, there's still so fucking much. Like, it's endless. Yep. And I'm not really in a position where I can hire anybody. I am spending hours and hours alone. I am trying to learn all this stuff, and it feels like no progress is being made. It's like the progress is so intangible at the very beginning that it's like, well, I thought I was supposed to make 7 figures a year within like 6 months of doing this. And it's like, no, like timing matters quite a bit. That person that maybe did do it in 6 months, good for them, but maybe they got in it right as AI started growing, and so they hit this huge bump, and that's awesome for them. But now that there's a larger, there's more people trying to take from that pie, it's going to be that much more fucking difficult. How are you going to stand out? Like, you really got to think critically. And then you don't have the skills, and you're just like, man, fuck this. Like, I'm going to go back to work at my job. Like, this is too much. So it's being confident throughout it is, I think, a big, big piece.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm always insanely impressed by people who were going at something for 6, 7, 8 years. You know, I was at a Grant Cardone's 10X conference back in early April, and he was interviewing Tyler Perry. And it took him 7 years to become remotely successful. He just every year failed. I'm like, man, that is, you know, I know some people say that's stubborn as all hell. You know, certainly if you're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, it's probably not going to work out. But being able to stare down failure, especially colossal failure, that frequent year after year, I always give those kind of people just so much credit because it's not for everybody. You know, most of the time people give up on, like, I can't even find anything on Netflix. Let me just quit. You know, I mean, like, these guys are like failing business. Like, you know, who was like homeless. I'm like, dude, like, these people are impressive as hell. And that's why it's not for everybody. You know, I wish everybody could make 7 and 8 figures, but it's not going to happen because the mentality that you need to get there, it's different. You know what I mean? And I have parents that were entrepreneurs, and they did really well. But my mom had a business, and it failed. You know, and I was talking to her a few weeks ago about that because I never really, you know, as you get older, one of the things that's interesting enough as your parents get older is you start picking up on their wisdom, but you start having some conversations about their experiences that probably are going to be pretty relevant to you. And speaking to her, like, what was that like? And having her actually have to articulate that I felt like the biggest failure ever and had to pick myself back up and go back into starting another business. And it's just a lot of people would just fail and say, well, I guess this wasn't for me, you know, as opposed to saying, all right, what could I do differently? What can I learn from this? How do I approach this a little bit, you know, a different scenario that instead of making the same mistakes over and over again? Because, nowadays too, especially failure is almost like a badge of honor. Like people walk around saying, hey, I failed like 10 times. Like, okay, like I'm not saying don't be proud of that, but are you doing things differently? Or, I mean, we all know Thomas Edison failed like thousands of times, but eventually the guy discovered like, a light bulb, had to put that together. It's like, if you're going to do the same thing over and over again, it's like, don't wear it like a badge of honor. Figure out how to get better from it. You know, and that's what you see a lot in the entrepreneur space now is you have to fail to be successful. It's like, you don't have to. You probably will fail, but don't do it intentionally. Life will help you enough to fail. Try to make yourself successful, but more importantly, just failure is only beneficial if you actually learn from it. And that's where a lot of people, I think, just kind of miss that little extra section.
I wonder why. Like, I wonder what the disconnect is in that moment of some, like, you see the failure, you kind of, I mean, maybe that's the point. They don't see the failure. Like maybe they see what the failure looks like, but not what the failure means. And so then they kind of extrapolate and say, well, how does this apply and how do I navigate the next thing? I think you had a really good point. I don't know if it's okay. If it's not, I can cut it out. But talking about the DISC personality test in the very beginning, like you lean more towards an anger personality type. And then getting mad at people for not knowing what your triggers are when you don't even know what your triggers are. It's like, if you don't know the why, then how can you make a change so that not just you are better, but everyone around you understands you, maybe can make your life a little bit easier, but then you can also make their life a little bit easier because they don't want to deal with it either, but so instead of just seeing the anger, it's okay, why? And then how do I make that change? How do I communicate that to somebody?
Yeah, I mean, well, part of that too is definitely going back to that confidence angle, where you just end up beating yourself up, right? And you just make yourself feel like a pile of crap. Just like, what an idiot. You talk so bad to yourself that it doesn't allow you to actually see what's really there. And like, I made that mistake. Like, I've definitely done that numerous times. Thankfully, a lot less now. But you just screw up and you're so obsessed with not knowing what you did wrong, just that the fact that you actually did something wrong. And we hold ourselves to a standard that isn't attainable, and that's usually perfection. And we all want to I got to be perfect, and it's just, well, there's no such thing. So all you're going to do is continuously let yourself down. And like, gee, I can't imagine why you call yourself a piece of shit. Like, who's perfect? But that's what we're all looking at, So like, I got this vision of who I'm going to be. It's like, well, you can envision yourself making mistakes too, because you're human. It's going to happen. So I think a lot of it too is just we end up focusing so much energy into why did I do that and just how wrong it was, instead of, okay, why did I do that and what could I do differently? We just go down a rabbit hole of beating the shit out of ourselves, and it's just, you don't allow yourself to see what's actually really there.
That is, I lost my train of thought immediately after you stopped, and I was like, "Wow, that's really good," and then I forgot entirely, and I'm sorry.
That's all good, but I mean, look, I've done the same thing. I mean, even just moving out here, I made some pretty poor financial decisions, and it's just because I was in a rush. I was rushing the process that I was going through, make mistakes. Then I felt horrible, especially because I'm not single, I'm married. So it's not that I'm just responsible for myself. It's one thing if I, end up having a crap life, but I have somebody else in my life that I care about that I'm also like, I kind of look at it as responsible for her as well. So you rush into it, and then you climb down the hole, and it's just like, okay, I failed again. Then I made another mistake. Instead of just stopping and doing a hard reset, because then it's like gambling, right? You lose money. What do most people do? All right, let me double down, try to make it back. and then they lose again. It's like, ah, shit, it's only $400. I could like get that back. And then before you know, it's like, how you doing, hon? Yeah, I'm down like 10 grand. This is the hand that gets me back. It's like that's the next move is the one. Instead of stopping and saying, all right, what am I doing wrong?
A lot.
And giving yourself some time to actually think. And that's what I find that even myself and a lot of other people, we don't allow ourselves time to actually think about what it is that we're doing and how we're executing on it. And we're just always, all right, let me just do something else. Let me do something else instead of actually figuring out what's going to work.
I remember when I first, like, I had this negative self-talk all the time about like being a bad personal trainer. Like I'm so uneducated. I don't provide enough value, like constantly inside of my head telling me these things. And I had someone ask me, it's like, what's your 10? Like, what do you rank yourself at? And what's a 10 to you? And I was like, I don't have a 10. I'm like, that's your problem. You don't have anything that you're looking as a benchmark of success, and so success is just better, and so you're never going to be there because it's always being pushed further and further along. So find somebody or something, a business, a number. If like my goal is I want to make $10 million this year, then that's your 10. And then how do you get from like where are you actually at? Are you really a 2 like you're telling yourself, or maybe you're more like a 5? You're doing pretty good,
yeah.
And you didn't even realize it. And then now you just go ahead and bring that to now. How do I get to a 10? How do I achieve that? And maybe you get to an 8, but fuck, an 8's pretty damn close to 10. That's pretty good. And now the following year you have that much more to work with. Like it's the little steps for the long game. And then not talking yourself out of madness the entire time. Yeah.
But you got to sometimes you have to make it easy too, right? Yeah. What I mean by that is the person who, hey, a 10 out of 10 life for me is just, I get up every day and I put my feet on the ground. They're probably going to do pretty well compared to the person like, I need to make $5 million a year. I need to have 8% body fat. It needs to be sunny 340 days out of the year. It's like, you're probably going to suffer and have a shitty life compared to the guys like, if I get up, that's a 10 for me. So sometimes the criteria that we set for ourselves are just so ridiculous, and it's almost like our own personal rules, like our model of the world. Like it has to be just this way for me to feel a certain way. It's just, why do you make it so hard then? You know, so even when you're looking at success, because again, right, everybody's definition of what success is. Some people it's purely financial. Then you see a lot of people who are miserable. Like there's nobody, people hate this guy the most. The one who's a billionaire is miserable. It's like, screw you, dude. Like, we're all struggling. You got $1 billion and you're unhappy. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But it's their rules. It's their standards. It's, well, I haven't done this yet. Or I achieved my goal, but now I don't know what the hell I'm doing next. So that 10 out of 10, like you put it like, well, it's $5 million. Like, okay, you got $5 million, but now what? Are you still at a 10 out of 10? It's like, no, shit. Like, I'm not. So what's the next level for you? I don't really know. And I find that's people don't look at what the progression is. So we have our goals, you attain it, but then what's next? So like for you, you're working with people who want to lose weight or maybe get to a certain body fat percentage. Well, what happens when they get there? So now it's like, well, I plateaued. So what is going to keep me motivated at that point? What's going to keep me pushing to the next level? Which is why a lot of people, right, they gain the weight back. Then, okay, now I got something to work towards. Let's lose all this weight again. So you got somebody who's probably lost 10 pounds in their life, but they've really lost like 100 because they just keep gaining it back. And, you know, that's the way we do it too. It's like we purposely set ourselves back so we have something to shoot for.
That is fucking amazing. I think that it, like, as you're saying that, I'm like, man, I use this 10 million goal, I think, as a, like, I don't know, some sort of standard. Like, I think it's like, it's where my mind immediately went, which makes me like look inside and say, why did I use that? You know, like, why is that my thing? But there are so many other areas of like, what if it's just like, maybe it's not even money, right? Like, I think that's the point. Like, I need to get out of that space. It's, man, I was able to post, X amount of podcasts more than last year. That's just, like, I got to meet 2 new friends this year. Like that, what are your values? And then how do you continue to grow into fulfilling those values? I want to be more involved with the community. Maybe we volunteer. And like that, like I volunteer once a month. That's something that's fulfilling for me. it doesn't always need to be financial. And I think that is a very good reminder for me personally, remembering that there are other areas of success that I can sit in today and enjoy, that I got to meet you, that this podcast is still going, that we're still doing this thing, that there's love in this home, that I have a good dog. Like, there's so many things.
Yeah.
And it's so, I don't know why I forget about those things so quickly.
Well, if you think about it, look, there's definitely nothing wrong with money, So if your goal is like, I want to make 10 million. Okay, why? Right? Because again, it's just like, well, I don't know. It just seems like a nice round number. It's like, all right, what are you going to do with it? Like, I don't really know. So if you have a purpose to it, right? And I know some people equate like money with like you're doing something shady or you're evil or whatever it is. Like, well, I could donate a lot more of that. So there's a lot of benefits outside of just the fact that shit's expensive nowadays. There's a lot of good you could do with finances. But when you have to look at all-encompassing aspects of life, you could be insanely wealthy and your relationships suck. So when you're really, to your point, it's like, what's going to actually make me feel fulfilled? And go back to that person who has $1 billion and they're miserable. They haven't fed the other areas of their life. Their health usually sucks. It's hard to enjoy your life when you're physically falling apart or mentally falling apart. You maybe have nobody close in your life because you push everybody away because you're just so driven by money. So, when you have to assess, I mean, at least for me, I'll look at, it's called like the wheel of life. Just kind of breaks everything down, like finances, health, like all those different aspects of life. And it's just making sure, am I keying in on those things that are really that important? Because you can lose money, but you can make it back. But you might lose your wife and never get her back. That's the things, like the things that we usually take for granted are the things that we probably should never lose.
What are the things that make you feel grateful for your life?
It's the simple stuff. Honestly, it sounds silly, but coming from an area of the country that, like, coming from New Jersey, like, weather, I'm super grateful. Like, I know it sounds silly, but my relationship with my wife, my family relationships that used to be terrible, that I've put a lot of work into getting better. My pets, it's like, honestly, I've really tried to key in on just the things that, again, we take for granted. Like, you take for granted that you have a house. Meanwhile, billions of people do not, do not have electricity or do not have a running water system. So just the little things like that have really made me be more acutely aware of just my surroundings and not really focus on, I'll be happy when I have, the 4,000 square foot house with, I don't want any of this, marble staircase. Like, I'm not looking for that. But, some people like, then I'll be happy and then I'll feel fulfilled. And I'm working towards that $10 million to get something else. And it's just, why can't you be happy with where you're at now? Like, there's always good in everything that we're doing. So for me, I've gotten a lot better at being grateful for, I don't even want to say the small things, because I feel like what I just described are probably the biggest things, which the relationships that we have. And that was something I never focused on when I was younger. I think I had the classic young male mentality of just dive into work, build myself up. But then you start realizing what you might have pushed aside or sacrificed. And that's the stuff that I've been more focused on being grateful for.
Those are good things.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's very easy. And especially like living in America, some of us are so spoiled. So if you don't go out of the country, you're really missing an opportunity to see how good we have it. And I remember even going to a family in Israel, and I went, oh my God, it's like 9 years ago. And I remember getting like ticked off that I needed to flip a switch on for 20 minutes before the water in the shower got hot. And I was like all pissed off. I'm like, all right, like, what are we complaining about here? And then number two, like, I'm going to make sure I'm really grateful for the fact that I could just turn a faucet at home and get immediate hot water. So it's just, sometimes, like, the small things that we always take for granted, those are the things that you could always be grateful for, because there's so many people out there who have it way worse than you.
I think it's, like, hearing you say it is a good, healthy reminder that, do you ever stray away from that? And then how do you, like, how do you click back in, right? Because I think that we always are gonna, like, drift away at some point. You get busy, you start kind of doing your thing. How do you bring yourself back into that mentality?
So I give myself, I don't tie myself, but I've given myself like a timer in my head of like how long I will just kind of bitch about stuff. Because we all like to do that. That's like our new national pastime. It's not baseball, it's complaining. But it's just knowing what it completes leading to.
That's just so. I'm sorry. Good.
Nah, you're good. But,
so good.
So it's realizing, understanding again, like having some emotional control. What does getting out of control lead to? And I think most people would say nothing really ever good. Because we make the stupidest decisions and we do the dumbest things and we say the worst things we'll ever say when we're in an emotional state. And when I've gotten out of that mindset, so to speak, almost like that gratitude mentality, it's exactly what it is. It's just emotions that honestly make me feel worse. Like as much as for me, and again, we all have our certain emotions. For me, it's anger. I know how I feel when I get in that, and it's never good. It's not like I ever got angry at something. I'm like, well, that turned out positive. So it's realizing what is the detriment. And, you look at really high-level achievers, and it's like they can't get upset about much, or we all feel the same thing. It's just how quickly will you, to your point, pull yourself out of it and get back to reality. And the sooner you can do that, the better you're going to be. Because you think about it, like how many of us have like a whole day ruined, right? It's like this guy cut me off. When was this? 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, it's 6 o'clock at night now. The whole day was ruined. It's like you literally let one person ruin a whole day of your life. And how often do we do that? So how much time do you lose every single year for like bull crap that doesn't even matter? And that's what really, at least for me, like the biggest switch is this leading to positive outcomes for me? And that always, that pulls me back right away. And it's not often that I go there anymore, but back in the day, it took me a lot longer. I was like, that's like, all right, this person insulted me, and like 10 hours later, I'm still pissed off about it. It's like, what good is this doing?
Does the DISC personality test give you like a framework of how to work through your personality, or at that point, do you find other resources?
No, I mean, it gives you a good idea of just what your patterns are. And that's the thing about all of us is just we're really our patterns of what we picked up when we were younger, our life experiences. Everybody kind of perceives things differently. But knowing what your pattern is one thing, and then being able to self-educate on, all right, what causes me to follow that pattern, so to speak? How can I break it? And again, just knowing really what good comes from it, what bad comes from it maybe. When you start analyzing like the bad versus the good, that's what allows you to actually make the change. I think for most people, we just think everything we do leads to good stuff, and anything bad that happens to us is a result of somebody else or something else, instead of being able to look at ourselves and say, what part did I play in this?
It's good.
Yeah.
Looking inside more than looking and blaming outside, which is your book.
Yes.
I love the title.
My book. Well, I'm the problem. It's like every married man's, I'm like kidding. Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to. You got to look at it and say, what part am I playing in the decisions that, again, we make our own decisions. We have control over that. It's not anybody else. So it always comes down to, what did I do? And again, it's not to say something horrible happened to me. That was my fault. But in the realm of my book, which was a leadership, that's going to come down to, what are you doing that's affecting everybody else? Versus what a lot of people do and what I used to do when I was younger, which is, what is everybody else doing that's affecting me?
I want to know what the story is behind the book. With this, from like, why did you start? Like, where the idea came from that I'm going to write a book, and then what is it like writing a book? Like the process of going through the actual creation, and then now like being able to physically hold the thing. It's wild to me. So,
no, I mean, honestly, the idea behind writing it is just I feel that it took a very common pathway that a lot of people go to, which is you're an entry-level employee, you're doing really good, and you're, A+ results, making a lot of revenue for the company. So therefore, you're now in a leadership position. And then you step into it, and after the euphoria goes away, and then you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And for some of us, like myself, it just takes you longer to figure that out. Some people know going into it. Some other people who are a little bit stubborn or a little bit egotistical, it might take years. So for me, I was in a ladder group, took years, unfortunately, but we learn as we go. And for my perspective, it was just not seeing the growth from other team members that I would have expected to see based on how much time and effort I was putting into it. And that's why I used to say it's got to be them. But you got to get to a point where you're around a large number of people. It's probably not them. It's probably at some point it's you. And it's just, again, it's very easy to just blame everybody else, say I'm doing everything at a high level, and not being able to take the time to just do some self-reflection and see, all right, what am I doing? How am I executing on this? How am I communicating? And just, like I said, slowing life down and self-analyzing. So for me, it was not seeing the growth from other people. And then the thing that really kind of kicked it off was, and this was basically the whole first chapter in the book, was just being at an event. It was a Tony Robbins event. So if you've never been to a Tony Robbins event, it's usually thousands of people and ton of good vibes. A lot of emotions, but just a lot of genuine love between people who don't even know each other, because you're all going through the same shit. You're all trying to either get yourself out of some bull crap, or you're trying to just drastically improve your life. Maybe you're at a good spot and you're trying to get to great, or maybe you're at a horrible spot and trying to get to good. So it's all very similar goals. And there was a moment, I never understood the concept of people who feel lonely, or they get depressed with, like, amongst people I feel alone. Like, I never actually understood that, because I've never been that, thankfully. And it was a moment among those 5,000 people where I felt like there was just a bubble around me, a bubble of just negativity. Nobody wanted to get close, and I never felt more lonely. And I was like, this is interesting. I feel lonely as hell, and there's 5,000 people jumping, hugging, high-fiving, and I was like, this is not good. Like, this tells me there's something going on with me. And that's what just basically started the process. Like, I got to figure out what it is about me that's kind of creating a wall almost, or creating a disconnect between myself and others. And that is what started the whole process.
What a moment.
Yeah. Not a good moment in retrospect, painful as hell in the moment. There's really there are worse things than realizing that the way you've living has been totally wrong, but it's high up on the list of some painful scenarios.
I'm putting myself in those shoes, and I would feel so, like, this deep sense of hurt. Like, what have I been doing?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I experienced.
Oh God,
yeah.
Dude.
It's not fun.
That hits me in the feels a lot of it. Like, that's hard.
Especially when you realize you've been going years of, again, just blaming everybody else. And then you're like, damn, what the hell have I been doing for the last 5 years or 10 years or, however old you are, maybe 20, 30, 40 years. Like, holy shit, I've been doing this myself.
How did it make all these other people feel just because of the thing that I wasn't willing to address? Or didn't you know that I needed to address?
And everybody else sees it. Right? So they're like, we knew that. What the hell took you so long to catch up?
Fuck.
Crazy.
Fuck. I've heard such good things about Tony Robbins events, and like how they are very like eye-opening and very spiritual. And he talks about the science. He had these people attached to, I guess, heart rate monitors, I guess. And I'm sure that there was more, and I'm missing more. But he talks about the effects of one of those speaking events and how people will have this like large drip of like or what do they call it? Oh my God. I think he references like dopamine, serotonin, probably somewhere in there, the epinephrines. But these feel-good hormones that are in our brain and how they extend after so significantly. And I thought it was like, wow, like you can surround yourself with a group of good, like an individual speaker that's providing good vibes, if you will, speaking about good, positive things that makes an effect, not just for like one or two people, but for like a large body of people. And the fact that they're together, even more significant. And then he did it over Zoom during COVID. And these people, even they had these similar effects that were like, again, it's backed by science, not bullshit. It's like, that is so freaking neat. And I've never met somebody that's actually been to one of their events. And obviously, like it sounds like a spiritual event. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, they're great, but you still have to do the work.
Yeah.
Because the thing, I had gone to an event prior to that, and it was a little awkward back in the day, like, but you come out of there and it's just life changing. And but then, and to your point, it's like that next month was like on a high, and then you start coming down, and all of a sudden 2 months go by, and you're like, I'm back to where I was. I didn't put the work in. So it's anything else. It's literally like anything else. Like, if you're gonna not put the work, don't expect to change, because those feel-good chemicals, they do wear off. So, and that's why I like get people who they're just into motivation. Like, I need to be motivated every day. I'm like, you're doing the wrong shit in your life if you need to find motivation every single day from somebody else. And that's all it is. It's just they're looking for that feel-good chemical. It's like, you got to be able to create that yourself. And that means you got to put the work in. So that's why after the first event, I was like, well, that was a fail. And it wasn't on the event's fault. It's just, I was like, I didn't do the work. So I went back and I'm going to put the work in this time and take what I got out of there and actually do something with it, which is what I did.
And that was the book.
Yeah. It was just basically the next 4 or 5 years, essentially, just coming clean with going in front of a team of employees and telling them how you've been screwing them over, how you've been doing things the completely wrong way, and how you got to turn it around. But like anything else, you want to see the person actually do the work, right? Because talk is cheap. So it's one thing for somebody to say, I've been doing it wrong, I'm going to change, just like in any relationship, right? Like, I swear, Ben, this will be different this time. It's like, I got to see you do the work before I take you back. Like, can't just say that. And so it took some time. It's hard when you've essentially violated employees' trust for so long. They're not all of a sudden just going to okay, I know it's going to be better now and I should trust you. They were very guarded, and they wanted to see, are you actually doing the work and are you actually changing? And it takes time. And it's just, to your point about, being an entrepreneur, you want it real fast. Like, I wish, all right, next week, I want it to be that amazing leader that everybody's like, I love working for this guy, and it's amazing. It wasn't that quick. That's where I find out a lot of people they don't go through the process because like, dude, this is going to take me a while. It's like, it is, but how many years? It's like being on a diet. It's like, hey, man, I've been working out with you for a month. Why didn't I lose that 40 pounds yet? It's like, you've been eating like shit for 30 years. Like, what do you expect? And you've never worked out a day in your life. But it's like, you want a 6-pack and 30 pounds of weight loss in a month? Like, what? That's just the way people, it's the way we are. Like, we want stuff really fast. And I could appreciate that if you're putting in the work. If your goal is to expedite the process. So instead of taking 10 years, maybe it takes you 3. You still accelerated the process by 7 years. But if your goal was 6 months, then you failed. So is it reasonable, the timeline that you put in place to achieve something? And that's what it was. It was just a continuous process, and not just, hey, I think I'm getting better. It's actually, how do you assess your own improvement when it comes to building a team and trying to change yourself and trying to change the culture and being able to get feedback from employees to see, all right, where do I need to get better at next? Or do you see what I'm trying to do here? So it definitely took some people a good amount of time, but they see you making the changes and actually putting into place. That's what will start getting people to buy in.
Making those smart goals, following through. Like, big on you. I don't think that goes. I don't think I've seen that, and so I think that definitely deserves quite a bit of kudos. Like, I've had bad bosses in the past, and there's never like a recognition of, oh shit, yeah, no, actually, I haven't been my best.
Yeah,
and sometimes I've said like, hey, I'm sorry as an employee, I didn't follow through on this. Like, unfortunately, expecting that to be offered in return is like, I'm sorry too. And then there wasn't that, and I'm like, yo, well, wait, what? Like, just me? Like, hey, it takes 2, dog. Like, that's not cool.
Yep.
So I think that that's a lot of kudos, and then to follow through with it even more. And like, the version of you that's sitting in front of me today sounds vastly different from the version of you 5, 7, 10 years ago. And I think that's like, being proud of this version of Dan is, I think, should be like continuously noted within yourself.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely, again, it's very easy to say I'm going to change, or we can take an important step in acknowledging where we haven't been who we maybe need to be for other people. But then it's completely different to say, now I'm going to completely change that around. and I'm going to start acting different. Like, I'm going to learn how to act different, talk different, versus, well, I admitted I screwed up. Isn't that enough? It's no, you actually need to now put the work in so you don't keep making the same mistakes. Because that's what it'll come down to. Because that's, employees definitely appreciate, like you said, it's like, man, I appreciate you saying it was your fault, but you keep doing the same thing. You keep yelling at me. So at some point, your apologies mean nothing, and I'll just go someplace where I don't get yelled at. So you have to definitely, when you're, like I said, when you're focused on just getting better and improving and actually having a tangible goal of like, all right, what am I working towards? Versus very easy just to look at business numbers and say, I don't need to change because look how well the business is doing. We're killing it. Then it's also, well, could you have done better if you were this different person? Like, the way I look at it is maybe a company made $5 million, which is potentially pretty damn good. But what if you were supposed to make 6, or 7 or 8, and you lost, maybe you lost the CFO because you constantly yelled at the person and they said, screw this, I'm going to leave. And now it took you $500,000 to replace them. And there's other high level executive left. Like, that stuff adds up, and those are the business metrics that people don't track. And when you start doing the math on it, then you're like, oh shit, like I cost the company I was working with easily 6 figures just by people quitting. So when I started eventually wrapping my head around that, like, damn, I cost them a lot of money. And that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to actually help them make money. The motivation to grow wasn't financially. That kind of came a little bit after. But that's when things really change, is when it can actually put a number behind bad traits of leaders and bosses, managers, owners, whatever you want to call it. That's when it adds up, and it's like, oh shit. Like, so even if you're not vested in growing as a person, it's like, do it for your business.
Yeah. I think the one thing, like linguistic programming, I think is one area. So like, I want to be able to like, so I made this own thing, and I think you kind of referenced one earlier, like these other areas of your life that are you giving enough like love towards? So like family, business, or work, your health. I wrote it down in one of my notebooks, and I have like 5 different metrics that I like to look at, and I want to be able to have several different metrics, and I don't know if you know of any like that you could add to it for personal growth. And I think like language is one. Reactions could be another. Like I used to get upset if something was just not, like I couldn't find something. I'm the one that misplaced it. I'm the only one that lives in this house. Like, why am I upset? Because I wasn't organized?
Yeah.
Oh shit. It's my fault. I wasn't organized. So what do I have to do? Get organized. Not, it's my fault. I couldn't get organized, and like beat myself down to the point where I never get organized now, because I'm have such a disdain for organization that I continue to repeat the same problem. So I wonder how many, like I want like 5 of them. I don't know if that's a thing, but I want to put it into a graph. I think that'd be super cool, because I think it's tangible at that point, rather than just like, I listen to a lot of podcasts that are like, I like comedy podcasts mainly. But like if I listen to a motivational podcast, sometimes I'm like, okay, but like, where's like, how can I pull something out of here to apply it to my life?
How do you measure it?
How do you measure it?
Yeah. So, I mean, so some of the aspects like that you're describing, like emotional intelligence, some of those, what we call like soft skills now, empathy, communication, and I talked about that a little bit in my book in terms of communication. It's one of the most important things in our life. And it's an area that most of us never even work on. Which is just, it boggles the mind, right? It's like literally most of life is built around communication, and we never work on it at all. Like even in school, it's not like any of us were taught, hey, this is good body language, this is terrible body language, don't make these facial expressions, this kind of tone. We don't learn any of that. We're just expected to know.
Which is insane.
I know.
Which is insane. People make money off of speaking, like, because it's such a skill, and it's just like, good luck.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, why does an employee terrible? They don't know the skills. Like, well, what do you expect?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's basically looking at those areas of life that don't have a number attached to it, right? So it's easy to your point. I don't know why the $10 million was my goal. Well, it's easy to keep it on, right? Just go in Bank of America, whatever. Like, all right, well, how much is in my account? okay, I'm getting there. Your goal is I want to be a 10 out of 10 communicator, and here's the evidence behind it. Well, that gives you something tangible to work off of. But if you're like, hey, I just want to be a better communicator, it's like, how do you measure that? I don't know, less fights with my wife. Like, I guess that's a good start, but it's not really telling you much.
Yeah.
So and that's why we don't ever track it, because we don't really ever measure it. And there's that quote, I can't remember who the hell it was by, was what gets measured is like more or less what gets improved upon. And that's the same thing with, these life skills, like you said, communication or emotional control, emotional mastery. Is like, what is my criteria to know that I'm making improvement in those areas?
Do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, all joke aside, like definitely not getting in arguments with my wife. No, but like, stuff like that. It's like, all right, my emotional control. So
Emotional control.
assessing how I was doing personally in the realm of leadership. My criteria was just, am I seeing other people step up as leaders? So if your goal is I want to be a high level leader, it's like, okay, what does that mean? And for me, it was, I just want to get other people to level up as well. So when I saw that happening, I was like, okay, we're moving in the right direction. Or if it was, I want to improve my communication, because right now it's horrible. And usually back then anyway, most people, one-on-one conversation like this, they'd leave either confused, frustrated, or pissed off at something that I said. So for me, it was just being more aware of, okay, what are their after effects? Like, are they improving from maybe feedback? But in the moment, what's their body language telling me? Right? So being able to just read what somebody, because everybody gives you the information. It's just, are we willing to be open to it and accept it? So if I'm talking to somebody and, we're doing this, the old me would be like, they're taking this in really well, versus they're completely closed off and guarded and they're not open to anything that you're saying. So it was really being just fully present in the moment, which is challenging to do when you're maybe thinking about 10 different things, and we think about your own communication. How much of us talk to people and then we're thinking about something random? Like, I'm talking to you, but then, what's for dinner tonight? And what's on the next House of the Dragon? It's like, you're not even like paying attention to what the person is telling you. And then we miss all this nonverbal communication. So that was one of the things that I really keyed in on, is just, what is their body language telling me? And is it telling me that what I'm saying is making sense to them? So that was maybe not the best criteria, but at that point, that's just what I had, because I was like, how do I know that what I'm doing is actually working? So a lot of it's just the actions that other people are taking.
I think that's, I don't know. I think those are good. I don't know. I like those. I mean, like earlier when I said I lost my train of thought, I definitely was thinking about something else. I was thinking about, okay, what is the position of that camera and how is that going to look? And like, am I sure that that's okay? Which in the future, hopefully we can have, we can add like somebody to do my camera switching. So it's just something I don't have to worry about anymore. But I've gotten so much better at like not thinking about those things, because, okay, now we got a system. I know that click, 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 and play, and we're good to go. Make them face towards me so I know that I can see the red dot blinking, so I know that we're good to go. Like, and then I listen to a podcast now, Catching Up with Nadav, who's a podcast producer for Your Mom's House, and he's done a lot of different PA stuff. And he talks about like them having that same design on their cameras, and but it's on top instead. And I'm like, okay, so the thing that I'm doing is not insane. Like, that feels good. And he's like, you got to make sure that the talent doesn't ever have to worry about those kinds of things. So then as a producer, I'm looking to see that red button's on, and I'm here trying to play all these different roles. So like, I get it, but in that moment, remembering, hey, like, you did the things that you were supposed to do, and so trust the things that you did, and just be here in the moment and pay attention. We did a really cool drill so I'm in the master's program here at the MBA program. I wanted to level up my business acumen and also be part of the community. Really, I really wanted to get. Coming from Texas, not really having a large community here, I wanted to be involved and injected into a large community, especially around business owners. Or business owners and people that are like on the way to C-suite or whatever they're doing, leaders in the community.
Yeah,
ultimately. So God damn it! You see, it's happening again. So I got into the MB. Oh, we did this drill. It was 1 minute. You're with a partner, and 1 minute on and 1 minute off. So I talk for a minute, and you listen to me for a minute. with a prompt, and that prompt was, shit, I can't remember what that prompt was. The second prompt was, what do you wish more people know about you? And then the third prompt was, where did you grow up? What can you tell me about where you lived? And so you have 1 minute. I have 60 seconds to tell you, and then we switch roles after that minute. During that minute, I'm not able to talk, but I can emote. And then level 2 is now 5 minutes with a deeper topic of what do you wish more people know about you, but you can't emote. So you're looking dry at somebody as they tell you their story for 5 minutes, and then you switch, and then now you tell them your story for 5 minutes while you're just looking at somebody. They're not reacting to anything you're saying. So it's like, what do I do? Are they really paying attention? Are they not? And then the last one is 8 minutes. Now you can emote again, and then you switch roles. So, and then the last one is, what are you passionate about? So then you just go off for 8 minutes about what you're passionate about. And for a lot of people in the class, they were like, that was like the most difficult. Like after the first round, they were like, we did a minute, and they're like, that's one of the most difficult things that I've ever done. The entire time was like trying to like offer like, yeah, or trying to say something back to them to let them know that I was listening. It's like, how often do people really not practice communication in that kind of a space, and how valuable would it be to implement that maybe with my own, if I'm with a sales team, how often would that be valuable for that sales team to maybe practice their communication skill? We have 5 minutes, you can't emote, and we're going to switch, and then you're going to record back like what you heard. Are you really listening? Because it can be trained. And the point of the podcast was to continue to perfect that skill of communication. Doesn't matter if it never grows anywhere, then awesome. But then it is what it is. But at the very least, what I will get out of it is both community, and I will also be able to improve my communication skills, because no matter where I go, being comfortable talking with people, especially in front of a fucking camera, on a mic, with the headphones, like you have all this stuff to communicate an idea to somebody else, is how we operate. That's how anything gets done. So it was a skill that I knew that I have to improve. I felt like I was okay with it, but I knew I could level up. And so how do I do it? Put myself in there. And it's been a fun and difficult time, but it is something I think that more people should practice.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it, which is what is actually communication. And I think so many of us just focus on, when do I get to talk? Like, when is it my turn to just give my opinion on something that wasn't asked of me? And, we look at even like rapport building, where it's just, okay, we got to find common interests. So let me, I know for me, I'd be listening to somebody like, all right, what am I going to ask them? So when they stop talking, what do I say? So I'm like so focused on like, what's the next thing I'm going to ask? You miss all the good stuff they just gave you, and you're not really, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, and people could tell all the time. They say, dude, you're struggling because you're not listening. And that's where I feel like the communication, we get tripped up. It's just, what do I say? It's like, nothing. Shut your mouth and just listen and ask better questions. That's why I was like, it's always funny. What the hell was I reading? How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. The whole book is just listen and ask good questions. So for those of you that are introverted, like I am, it's like, that's great. I don't even want to talk. It's like, that's cool. I can just ask questions, and people think you have the best rapport with them. So it's really understanding how to not just listen to listen's sake, but when we talk about, leading people, it really comes down to, how do I influence others? Because that's what what you're trying to do as a leader, what you're trying to influence people to make better health decisions. It's like, well, I can't influence them if I don't understand them, if I don't know what they're thinking per se. I'm trying to get this person to lose weight. Meanwhile, the only thing that brings them joy in their life is eating garbage food. Like, it actually gives them a feeling that nothing else in life does. And now I'm telling them just to take that away. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense. You got to understand the person. The only way we can understand is by actually listening. And then you can influence people. And that's actually what, back to your question of like, how did I kind of gauge whether or not I was making progress? I think that's probably the best way to say it is, I saw that I was able to start influencing people. And that's when I knew things were actually starting to really grow. But I think that's what we're all trying to do, is we're trying to influence everybody else, but we're just trying to do that through our own words instead of understanding them better.
What do you define as influence?
It's just being able to help them. And I think that's part of, I will admit that's actually a challenge for me sometimes, where my way of influence will change maybe for the person I'm talking to. So it's, I want to influence to make a better decision with their life, or, to whatever it may be. And sometimes we can't do that in the realm of where just leadership itself. Influencing was, for me, just how do I get them to take more responsibility and take more ownership. And I think that's probably still what I'm looking at nowadays, is how do I just get you to accept that you have a part to play in this. So even if you're in a terrible financial situation, like, all right, what responsibility do you have in that? So I think, that's, for me anyway, that's where I look at influence, is just, can I accept you? Can I help you take more responsibility and accountability for your actions? Is, because again, it's not the matter of like, I want people to just do what that sounds very manipulative. To say I want them to just do what I want them to do, like, that's not actual influence. That's manipulation. So it's, can you help people find their path through their own discovery? And that's really what I look at influence. It's very easy for me to, or, you could tell me like, hey man, you got to do some more strength training, or, so now like, I got to figure that out for myself though too. If somebody else is telling us, we're not actually learning, and it just doesn't have the same effect versus the person who maybe went to the doctor and discovered, wow, my blood sugar is 100 points higher than it should be, and if I continue down this road, I might end up getting an amputation. Yeah, maybe I need to lose that 30 pounds. That's going to be more effective than just somebody like you or me rolling along like, hey, man, you'd really stand to lose 30 pounds. It's just better for your health.
It's good. Making the decision, owning the decision, having somebody own their decisions in their life. You risk losing people like that.
Yeah, you definitely do.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, again, it's really, what is your goal? Is your goal to be the most liked person? Or is it to be the most helpful? And if you really want to help people, or if at some point, I consider you a friend, well, a real friend will keep each other accountable. A real friend will hold each other responsible versus just telling you what you want to hear, right?
That's not a friend.
I know, right? But you see it all the time. Like, breakups happen. That guy was a jerk. Yeah, he was a jerk. And you take no responsibility for anything in a relationship. And a friend just tells you what you want to hear versus, well, you didn't call him back for a week or whatever it may be. So you have to be the person who tells people what they need to actually hear to grow. And you're definitely going to lose people 100%. But again, it's not a popularity contest. At least it shouldn't be.
I think the standard of, I feel like I've said this multiple times, but like the standard of excellence and the standard of success in whatever success is defined to you, I want other people to share a high standard of value. And I can want it all day long, and it's for them to own at the end of the day. And so figuring out how to influence people to have the higher standard is, I guess, leading from the front is the best way that I think about it. Like, if I want other people to be healthy, then I should probably be healthy. If I want other people to trust me, then I should probably trust other people. That was a big one for me. I mean, I grew up with my father, like, don't ever trust anybody. Like, not even your parents, don't trust anybody. And so I was like over here on an island, like never trusting anybody, never wanting to ask for any advice. Like, where do I go? And then realize, like, that's not healthy. Just if I'm untrusting of other people are going to be untrusting of me. And then I get nothing done. I don't build real relationships. Everybody's guard is up all the time. Is that really what I want to build? Fuck no, not at all. Not at all. Like, that sounds like a very scary life. And I live that life. And I'm thankful that I don't, and I have good people around me today, but it was the work that I had to do that. And I remember I gave a speech at for an event for the podcast, and the people that came up after me were pretty much a direct representation of what I was putting out that day. And I listened to people and realized, oh, like, this is what I said and this is what you picked up on. And then and I'll tell you off air exactly what it was. But I could see myself in these people, and it wasn't something I was proud of. And I was like, okay, like, I'm going to continue to attract what I am. I have to change. It was scary, but it was a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, you got to practice what you preach, basically, right? It's like, yeah, to a point, you go to a doctor who's like morbidly obese and he's giving you like nutrition advice. Like, okay, you might want to start with yourself first. So you want to be somebody. It's what am I doing every day to be that person? And are my actions and words congruent with how I see myself? And that's that disconnect. That's where a lot of people feel like that internal pain. And they're not living, they're telling themselves they're one thing, but they're really something else.
What a robbery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not fun. That's where like that, we kind of put up these walls or shields, so to speak, or we try to pretend something, we're not. And, even like you kind of bring it up before about how to not kind of climb down the rabbit hole of emotions and carry it forward all day. It's not about you. And that's where a lot of people, they want to deflect their own thoughts about themselves onto others instead of just dealing with what they got and trying to improve it. It's like, well, let me just, go after somebody else. So it is tough because, yeah, you lose years or decades to just the dumbest crap, like these beliefs that we just make up ourselves. Sometimes it's not even, you look back and like, well, who taught me that? It's nobody. I just made that shit up, and that's what I've been believing for the last 10 or 15 years. The good news, though, is you could change that. Yeah, that's always the best. That's the best thing. It's like, well, I made it up. That means I could just abruptly stop and make up a new story, a better one.
The power that we have is beautiful.
100%. You hit the nail on the head.
Where can people find you? What's your next, is it a master class that's going on? What you got going on here in the Las Vegas area, and how can people find you?
Myself, I got the book, obviously, we talked a little bit about The Problem. So for all you managers, directors, or if you just, you think you're struggling in leadership and want to know how to create that pathway, that's basically what I laid out in the book. Got a leadership course on my website, danneissany.com. We'll throw the spelling in.
Yeah, we'll put it in the yeah.
Yeah, I know, it just rolls right off the tongue. But leadership course. And then in Vegas, my buddy Antonio and myself, we're building out a healthcare consulting company. Sounds very blasé, but we're basically taking all these principles that we talked about, leadership, day-to-day operations, company culture, looking at growth and expansion strategies, and we're taking all that and just bringing that to healthcare. And that's the next thing that I'm excited for, man. Like, I've been in it for the last 15 years. I see how it works. I see the amazing results it gets for business, patients, employees, communities, and that's what we're trying to take to Vegas.
I love it.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
It might be a long or not long answer. I'm not sure. Looking this version of Dan.
Yep.
Looking at Dan from 5-10 years ago, what are some of those valuable things that this Dan has that Dan didn't?
So what I have now is definitely being more grateful. Yeah, and I know people, and you throw out gratitude a lot, and it's just, I think maybe it gets sometimes oversimplified, or maybe some people view it as just, like, all right, what am I being grateful for? But really taking stock of what you have day to day. Because we're always looking for either what we don't have or what we wish we could have. Like, I wish I had that house or that car, and he kind of takes you away from what you actually do have. So the gratitude that I now have, something I wish I had back then. And then just being more aware of just really who I am, not knowing myself back then. I find that's why I'm a real strong advocate for just knowing who you are. And it's not, again, like we talked a lot about how, in my eyes, how terrible my leadership was. I didn't think I was a terrible person, but it could have been better. But I think it also comes down to understanding what we're actually really good at too. So for the person I am now, where I've been advocating a lot for people that I'm working with, is not to just focus on, all right, these are areas of weakness, or like you pointed out your own example of like maybe not being the most organized, but then we lose our value in ourselves by not understanding, what am I damn good at? What can it be? What are the things that come natural to me that I just view it as not a big deal, but maybe somebody else struggles in that area, like maybe building connections with people. And then you have somebody who's insanely introverted, like I don't even leave my house, and I get anxiety just calling somebody. And your superpower is going out and just talking to networking people. And you're like, that's the simplest thing. What are you talking about? So I think going back, I'd be not more kind, but just more aware of what I'm really good at and not taking that for granted. And I know that was a major thing for me, because even I spent a lot of time in my craft. So as a physical therapist, which is what I used to practice in, looking back, I know I was amazing. I took a lot of courses, spent a lot of time getting better at it. But then I would just be like, I'm okay. And my wife, she was kind of very confused. She's like, you're amazing. Your patients tell you're amazing. And then you view yourself as mediocre. And it really destroyed any confidence I might have developed. It just completely annihilated it, because anything that I did really good, I was like, well, that's just what's expected of me. I didn't do anything outstanding. Even though the majority of people, that's the one thing in medicine, you're supposed to get great outcomes. But a lot of people don't. So again, it's just not taking for granted what may come natural to you, and really being more aware of what you're great at, and not just dialing in on the stuff that you're terrible at. Because ultimately what I've found out over time is that the things to get better at, you can improve, but there are just some aspects of life you will never get better at. Like, I'm just not good with technology, and I never will, because that's just not the way my brain works. So instead of getting frustrated and pissed and spending way too much time, I could just associate myself with somebody who is actually really good at that and just compliment me. So it's just being more aware of my strengths, being a little bit kinder to myself, not taking myself for granted. It's probably the best thing I would wish I had done. But, I think that's also the question too of, if you can go back in time, would you change anything? And I find that that is what leads you to become who you are. So if you say, yeah, I'd go back and make my life a lot easier, but then if I didn't struggle, would I end up where I am now? So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it would have been nice to cultivate some relationships, but everything happens for a reason. And you could either focus on what you don't have, or focus on what you do have and make everything just that much better.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
It's a good time, dude.
Yes, 100%.
Thank y'all. Like, share, subscribe. All the links will be in the bio, so go ahead and click on those links and go find Dan, find the book, and join the leadership conference program.
Yeah, program. Just you're all leaders, so work on yourself. Figure out how to lead other people. But yeah, get the course, read the book. It's not massive, so you'll get through it in a few hours, but just very condensed. Gave you all the good points.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Ben Nevares podcast. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, and all other major podcast hosting platforms. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes.